Hello there and welcome back. This is Barbara Ragsdale, independent maker with close to my heart. And if you purchased the Gnomes for Spring Scrapbooking Workshop Kit, this is the cutting video for your cardstock that is part of your cutting guide that you can download. I'm going to be starting with page number 3 and then also just a couple of notes. If you watched my pattern paper cutting video, all these stacks in front of me are my project 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's what all that paper is there at the top. I will note if we're going to be cutting from the dark side or the light side. So in your cutting guide instructions, anytime you see the little asterisk next to one of the cutting guides, that is the lighter side or the darker side, depending on what the instructions say. So, and just to point out what I'm talking about, cardstock paper is double-sided, and this is Glacier, by the way, and this is the dark side of Glacier. And then, of course, when you flip it, I'm not going to bend it so that you can see the two different colors. We're going to be cutting, the first piece we're going to be cutting is Glacier, and we're going to be flipping it to the light side on basically all of these cuts that we're about to do. In the cases where there's not an asterisk, you can assume it's the dark side unless otherwise noted, but I will point that out. I'll also be giving you the alphabet and the number to tell you which project it goes with. So if you have your stacks still out, I will say which name and which label it is. So let's go ahead and get started with your first piece of Glacier. And let me bring these a little bit closer so I can see them. Cutting on the light side, get your cardstock in your trimmer. And the first cut that we're going to be doing is a 1-inch cut all the way down. Okay, this 1-inch piece, turn it sideways, and we're going to cut it at 10.5 inches. Okay, so 10.5 inches. This piece is for P4. So put that with your stack of 4s. And this little piece that was left over is scrap. Okay, so let's get, we're still working off the light side. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn our cardstock to the left one time. Okay. And we're going to cut a 2-inch strip. So cut a 2-inch strip. Now, this piece that's left, this piece that we just cut off should be 2 inches by, we're going to cut a little bit of it off, 10.25. So turn it where it's long ways and cut it at 10.25. Okay. So this piece is 2 by 10.25. This is for P3, and you're going to be doing a banner cut on this piece. But when we start assembling project 3, we can do that at that point. So just put this with your P3, and this little piece that came off is scrap. This piece that's left, let me double check because we're going to cut it down to 10 by 10. And I think one side is 1 inch. So that's 10. And I think this should be 11. You're right. Okay. So this piece that's left, cut it down to 10 by 10. So you're only going to be cutting one side down 1 inch. So I'm going to put this in where it's the long side, the 11-inch side, and cut off 1 inch. And then now we're left with a 10 by 10 piece. And this is for P4. So put that with your stack of 4s. And this piece that's left, oops, that came off, is scrap. So put that with your scraps. And we pop that back in. All right. And let's go ahead and cut. I'm going to work down. Let's go ahead and cut our other piece of Glacier. And we're going to be working with the light side as well. And let's get this in our trimmer. And our first cut is going to be at 2 inches. So cut 2 inches all the way down. And then turn it long side in your trimmer and cut it at 8¼ inches. This 2 by 8¼ piece is for P4, project 4. And this little piece that's still in your trimmer is scrap. Now, the piece that's left, we're going to turn it counterclockwise one time, where the long piece is going in your trimmer. So you want to put your 12-inch wide piece in. We're going to be cutting on the 12-inch piece side. And we're going to cut at 2 inches. And that piece that we just cut, running out of room here, turn it back sideways and cut it at 8¼ inches. And this is also P4. So you're going to have 2 pieces that were the same that we just cut, and that little piece of scrap. Now the piece that's left should be 10 inches, which that side is, by 10 inches, which it is. Yay! So that last piece, that big piece that's left is 10 by 10. That is also for P4. So put that with your stack of 4s. And then now we're going to be cutting. Grab your flamingo. And we're going to be cutting light and dark side on these, but so let's find our light side first. We're going to be cutting the light side. So I got to flip this over. Cut your light side. And the first cut that we're going to be doing is at 4¼ inches. So cut it at 4¼ all the way across. And this 4¼ by 12-inch piece is for P2. So put that with your stack for project 2. And this piece that's left, flip it over to the dark side and put the long piece in. So your 12-inch piece needs to go landscape. So we're going to put that in long ways. And we're going to cut 5¾ Ooh, that's a small number. I had to double check that one. 5¾ Okay, so this piece that we just cut on the dark side is 5¾ yay, by 7¾ yay. This piece goes to P1, project 1. Okay, and this piece that's left, we're going to flip it to the light side. And we want to cut it down to 5½ by 7½. And let's do the long side first. So put it in to where the longer side, the 7, and this should be 7¾ Put it in that way in your trimmer landscape and cut it down to 7½. Okay, so you're going to have a tiny little strip here, which this little piece is scrap, and then flip it portrait and cut it at 5½. And this 5½ by 7½ piece is for P1. And this piece that's left is scrap. Okay. Now grab the other piece of flamingo, and we want to be cutting on the lighter side. So make sure you're on the light side. And ooh, this is going to be tricky, you guys. Look at that. So let's do it this way. We're going to have lots of little bitty kind of crazy scraps. Let's get it in our trimmer on the light side and cut it at 6¼ 6¼ Okay. Now, take that piece and turn it clockwise to where your 12-inch side is going landscape. And we're going to cut at 4 1/4 and then cut another one at 4 1/4. Okay, now these two pieces that we just cut that are 4 1/4 by 6 1/4, these go to P2 on the light side. Okay, so P2, this piece that's left, turn it where the long side is landscape in your trimmer and cut it at, I'm just double checking, cut it at 4 1/4. And then turn it clockwise once and cut it at 3 1/4. Okay, so you're going to have a small little bitty strip left over. So this piece that we just cut should be 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. And that is for project 2, P2. And these pieces, this little piece, this little strip is scrap, but this piece right here, this also goes to P2, but you're going to be using the dark side, and it's going to be for this thin cut. So it's going to be for the thin cut off this large there is going to be for die cutting that for P2. Okay, so I'm going to put that with my stack of P2s. Now, the piece that's left here, we're going to flip it to the dark side. And bear with me here. Bear with me here while I figure out the best way to cut this. Okay, so on the dark side, with it going with the long side being portrait, we're going to put this in our trimmer just like this. And we're going to cut it at 4 1/4. 4 1/4. Make sure that's lined up straight. Here we go. 4 1/4. And then turn it landscape on the dark side. And we're going to cut at 3 1/4. Now this 3 1/4 by 4 1/4, this is for P3, project 3 on the dark side. This piece that's in our trimmer, we're going to keep it in our trimmer and we're going to cut it at 3 1/4. And then take that piece and then turn it clockwise or counterclockwise. It doesn't matter. It's going to be cut at 3 1/4 again. So you want 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 for this piece right here on the dark side. And this is also for P3. This little piece that's came off your trimmer, that is scrap. And this piece, you're going to be using the dark side and you're going to be cutting, which one is it? It's going to be this thin cut. You're going to be cutting 2 of those. One of them is going to be for P2 and one's going to be for P3. So, oh my goodness. Hopefully we will remember that later, right? And then for P2, you're going to be cutting these two. Those two thin cuts right there. Hopefully you can see those. All of these are from the larger set of thin cuts. So you're going to be cutting one of these for P2, one of these for P3, and then you're going to be cutting a set of those out. So I think I might just leave those with my thin cuts since it's using multiple pages, I guess. Now this piece that's left here, we're going to be flipping it over to the light side and cut you a 9-inch piece. 9 inches. and it's going to get a little tricky here. So now we have a 9-inch piece. Turn it where your long side is going portrait and cut it down to 1 inches. And all I did is I flipped my paper to where I'm going to be cutting on the side that's already been cut, because this side was a clean side. When you press your cutting blade into your paper, it pushes the paper down, so you can always feel the smooth side versus the rough cut down side. So that piece that I originally had like that, I just flipped it so that I can cut off the rough side. Okay, cut this at 1 inches. 1 inches all the way down. Okay, and this 1x9 piece is P3. P3. And this piece that was left over here and this piece that was left over here is scraps. Got some good scraps. All right, now we are moving on to page 4 in our cutting instructions, and we're going to be cutting our 2 pieces of limeade. So limeade is, grabbing my piece right now, is this piece right here. And we're going to be cutting on the light side. So gotta flip it over. Make sure you're on the light side. This one looks like it's, well, this one's easy. We've got 4 cuts on this one. Okay. So on your light side, let's go ahead and cut it. Our first cut's at 4.5 inches. And then turn that piece where your 12-inch piece is going portrait and cut it at 3/4 inches. This 4.5 by 10 3/4 inch piece is for P4, project 4. This piece that's in your trimmer is scrap. And then this piece that's left, get it in your trimmer the same way it came out and cut it at 3.5 inches. Got a couple of weird cuts happening here, but that's okay. 3.5 inches all the way down, and then turn your paper landscape. And the first cut's going to be at 8.5 inches. This 3.5 by 8.5 piece is for P4, project 4. Now, this piece that's left in here, we need to cut it down to 3.25 by 3.25. So cut it at 3.25, and then turn it sideways and cut it again at 3.25. So this 3.25 by 3.25 square is for P4. And these 2 little strips that came off, those are scraps. This piece that's left on the light side, turn it to where your 12-inch piece is landscape and cut it at 8.5 inches. Okay. And then this piece that we just cut, turn it portrait and cut it at 3.5 inches. Okay. So this piece that is 8.5 inches by 3.5 inches is for P4, project 4. And these 2 pieces that are left are scrap. I got a nice little pretty pile of scraps going over here. All right. Now let's grab the other piece of limeade that you have. And we're going to be on the light side as well. So make sure you're on your light side. This one by far is the easiest cut of them all. I kid you not. So get this in your trimmer, and we're going to cut it at 5.25. Turn that piece landscape, the 12 inches is going landscape, and cut it at 7.25. So let me find my 7.25. Oh my gosh, it's in between blades there. Oh my goodness, you guys. My 7.25 is in between is in between the blades. This is gonna be a little interesting for me. So that's 1, I think that's the one right there. I'm double checking with my ruler to make sure I'm pretty close. Yeah, that's pretty close. Woo, hopefully your trimmer is a little more detailed. I hate it when it opens and it's in between measurements. All right, so this piece is 5 1/4 by 7 1/4. Let me just double check. Yep, perfect. This piece right here is for P3. So put that with your stack of threes. Now this piece that came off, in the instructions, it shows scrap, but it also shows that this piece right here is for, let me pull the die here. This thin cut right here, and pull that off. In the instructions, it shows that you use this large piece to die cut this hat, but this piece is also scrap as well. So I would suggest using the smaller piece for scrap. That way you have a really large piece in your scraps that's totally usable. So, but whatever you want to do, you're only die cutting one of these hats. So use the smaller piece. So I'm going to put this with my die cuts, and I'm going to put this large piece in with my scraps because that's a really good piece of scrap there. All right, now that was it for limeade. Now we're going to be cutting our jade paper, and we're going to start with the light side. So it is this side. Make sure you're on your light side. And oh my goodness, let me bring this a little closer because I want to show y'all. We're going to be cutting this right here. That is a lot of cuts. So I'll try to go slow here. The first cut we're going to do is at 3/4 inches. So cut a piece 3/4 inches. Oh my goodness, it moved a little bit. But it should be 3/4. Yes. Oh my God, it didn't shift on me. So this piece, this first piece that's 12 inches by 3/4 inches goes to P2. Put that with your twos, and then get your paper back in your trimmer, and we're going to cut a 1/2 inch strip. Oh my God, can it get any smaller? I better be quiet. It probably could. Ah, there we go. So this 1/2 inch by 12 inch strip goes to P2 as well. Okay. And this is where it gets a little interesting. We're going to keep our paper in our trimmer the way it is, and we are going to cut a 6-inch piece. So follow me here, okay? A 6-inch piece all the way down. All right. Now we're going to turn that piece landscape, and we're going to cut it at 8 inches. So this is the largest piece, which is good. So now you have an 8 by 6 inch piece. This is for P3. Okay. This piece that's left, turn it to where the long side is going landscape, and cut it at 3 1/4. I'm gonna have to do a piece at a time here. That piece that we just cut, turn it clockwise one time, to whichever. We're gonna cut it to 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 square. Okay, so however it's easy for you to do that. And then now we have a 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 square. That is for P4. P4. And this little piece that we cut off is scrap. This piece that had cut off before, we're going to cut a couple of these down. We want put it trying to figure out the best way to get the biggest piece of scrap. Put it to where the shorter side is going along the top, and cut it at 3/4 inches. 3/4 inches. Okay, that piece that we just cut, turn it alongside in your trimmer, and cut it at 3¼ inches. So this piece is 3/4 by 3¼ and that is for P2, project 2. That little piece that was left in there is scrap. And then we're going to do it again, but the second cut is going to be at 1/2 inch. I told you it was going to get a little tricky. 1/2 inch. And then turn that piece that we just cut alongside in your trimmer and cut it at 3¼ inches. So this 1/2 inch by 3¼ strip goes to P2 as well, project 2. That little bitty piece is scrap. And then this shows it's scrap, but it's you're going to be doing some die cutting, and it is going to be this thin cut right here, this one right here, and you're going to be cutting the dark side, and you're going to be cutting 2 of those. One of them's going to be for P2 and one's going to be for P3. So we'll have to, when we do the die cutting, when you do your die cutting, just refer back to your guide. So you'll need one for P2 and one for P3, and then that'll get rid of that piece of scrap. So let me put that with that. Now we have this big piece that's left over. I think this is still a 12-inch piece. Yes, it is. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to turn it to where our short side is at the top, and we want to cut it at 2¾ inches. Okay, and then turn it to where your long side is around the top, and we're going to cut it at 7 inches. So this 7 by 2¾ piece is for P4, project 4. And this is scrap. This is scrap. This long piece that's left, we're going to be cutting a couple of pieces. And so put it in your trimmer where the short side is up at the top, because we're going to be cutting 2 pieces that are 1/4 inch. Oh my God, it did get smaller. It did get smaller. 1/4 inch, you guys. We're going to cut 2 of them. Okay, so cut 2 that are 1/4 inch by 12. So we're not going to be cutting it again after that, but they are some thin strips. Get that in there. Go. Oh my goodness. So these 2 pieces that are 1/4 by 12 inch, these thin pieces, go to P3. P3. And we will be using the darker side when we go to put that together. This long piece that's left, is scrap. It's scrap. It is scrap. All right, we are getting close to the end. The next piece that we're going to be cutting is our piece of honey butter. And we're going to be cutting on the light side. So make sure you flip it to the light side. And our first cut is going to be at 2¾ inches. Okay, and then turn it where the long side's going along the top and cut it at 10½ inches. So just 2¾ by 10-inch pieces for P4, project 4. And this little piece that came off is scrap. Okay, and then we're just going to have scraps. Either way, I cut this one. So get it back in your trimmer the same way it came out and cut it at 3¾ and then turn it long side landscape and cut it at 8 3/4. This 3 3/4 by 8 3/4 is for P4. And this little piece that came out is, let me make sure, 3 3/4 by 8 3/4 is for P4. I'm trying to figure out why I have a bigger piece of scrap than normal. Bear with me. I'm just double checking something. I mean, that one's right. And that one's right. Okay. Well, this is scrap. All right. And then we're going to do it again. Okay. So get your paper and your trimmer and cut it at 3 3/4 all the way down. And then turn it landscape and cut it at 8 3/4. So we're going to cut another one of what we just cut. This piece is also for P4. And this piece right here, trying to think, I think we are using this one as to cut another piece. These should be the same, which they are. We're still on the light side. So we're going to cut this down to 3 1/4 by 3 1/4. So one of those pieces that just came off is already 3 1/4 inches wide on one side. So slip it to the other and cut it down to 3 1/4. And that piece is for P1. And the other piece that's left should still be 3 1/4 inches wide, but this is why I got confused a while ago, because I'm like, wait a minute, this should be 4 1/4 inches long, but it could very well be because I cut it wrong, which is not good. I'm so sorry. It is, it's 3 3/4 inches wide, but it needs to be 4 1/4 inches wide. And I can tell you where I went wrong, but I don't want to confuse you. So, you do have an extra piece of honey butter that is in your kit. If you happen to have another scrap piece of honey butter that's larger than that, you need a piece that's 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. And like I said, I can see where I went wrong, but everything else is going to be okay. It's just that one piece. So if you want to get it to the size it is, that extra piece of honey butter that is not part of the instructions, because after this is everything is, let me double check, is the white daisy. Yeah, it's the white daisy cardstock. You can certainly cut it off of that, or if you have another piece of honey butter, a scrap from like another project, cut you a piece at 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. What I might do is, I know I have an extra piece of honey butter. I can probably do a smaller video that where it's cut properly, because I know where I went wrong when I did that. So, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. But it happens, right? That's why I keep all my scraps, just in case. So let's go ahead and cut. I guess this one I'll just put in my scrap pile. And off of the other piece of honey butter that I have, we are still cutting on the light side. We want a 3 1/4 inch piece. So I'm going to cut it down at 3 1/4, and then I'm going to flip it and turn it and cut it at 4 1/4. All right, so this piece right here is for P1, project 1. And then the scrap, you can either use the scrap that we put away there, or you can use the scrap, any of these scraps that you have. We're going to be cutting, let me show you you're going to be cutting these two pieces of thin cuts, those right there. You're going to be cutting those, and it's going to be for P2. Okay, so even if you have smaller scraps of honey butter, I think you're cutting the darker side on that one. But you could have really small pieces of honey butter and get away with that instead of using this long strap. So, but you are cutting 2 of those on the darker side for P2. So let me put that with my P's and then put these with my scraps. And let's continue. We are almost done. We are going to be cutting our white daisy next. And these are pretty easy cuts. I can grab a piece. There we go. White daisy. And this is a 12 by 12 piece, and we're cutting it down to 10 3/4 by 10 3/4. So just cut it down. Cut one side at 10 3/4, and then turn it to either side and cut the other side at 10 3/4. So 10 3/4 by 10 3/4. This goes to P1, project 1. And these 2 pieces that came off are scrap. And then let's grab a second piece of white daisy. Go. And these are pretty easy cuts as well. We're going to put it in our trimmer and cut it at 9.5 inches. 9.5 inches. And then turn it long side, your 12-inch side at the top. And I'm sorry, hold on. Where did I cut it at? I cut it at 9.5 inches. Okay, then turn it sideways for your 12-inch pieces at the top, and then cut it at 3 inches. So you're going to have a 3 by 9.5 piece. Is for P4, project 4. And then we're going to cut it at 7.5. Hold on, let me back up. Let me double check this piece of white daisy. 3 by 9.5. Okay, I got it. So keep that piece in your trimmer the way it was and cut it at 7.5 inches. Go. So this 7.5 by 9.5 piece, make sure it's 9.5, yeah, is for P4 as well, project 4. And this piece that's left should be 1.5 inches wide, which it is. And we're gonna, it's already 9.5 inches. So this piece that's left should be 1.5 inches by 9.5 inches. And you're going to be doing a banner cut on one side, but that's for P3. And we can do that when we're putting together that particular layout. Now this piece that was left, this big piece, this should already be 2.5 inches wide, which it is. We're going to cut it down to, oh, that is so small, 6 3/4 inches. So 6 3/4 inches. And this piece is for project 4. And it is a journaling strip. So you're going to be journaling on that piece. So project 4. And this piece that's left is scrap. And the last piece, that's for cutting is white daisy, and it's for a couple of die cuts. It is for you need a piece to, for this particular thin cut and this little oval piece right here. But if you happen to have, I mean, it wants you to use that last piece of, well, one of the last pieces of white daisy that you have, the full piece to die cut that. But if you have a piece, like you already know, we have scraps left over from cutting the other pieces of white daisy. But if you have even a smaller piece, you can use a scrap to die cut one of those. The other piece that's left is not big enough to die cut this particular thin cut. So if you have a piece of white daisy that is at least, let me measure this, 4 3/4 inches wide by 4 inches, I would use one of those instead of using a whole nother 12 by 12 sheet of white daisy. Okay. If you don't, then of course use that extra piece that you have, but let's use up those scraps with smaller pieces that we already have available to use. And you'll be, that will be for P2. So I'm going to put that with my P2s. And this little bitty oval one also goes to P2 as well. So we're going to put that there. And hopefully I won't lose those. But other than that, oh my goodness, we are going at 41 minutes. That is it for the cardstock. I've got my pieces. I've got some extra pieces of cardstock, which is okay, but I've cut everything. Apologies for the honey butter piece, but I do have an extra 12 by 12 piece of honey butter. And so I'm going to do a separate small little video so that it cuts it the way I should have cut it, if that makes sense. So that video will only be literally just a couple of minutes long. So if you're watching the replay or watching it and you want to cut it right the first time, I'm going to do a separate little video for recutting the honey butter so that you don't have to cut into an extra 12 by 12 piece, your extra 12 by 12 piece. So hopefully that makes sense. And also, I will put it, I'll also include that video in with the Gnomes for Spring workshop playlist. So hopefully you see you see that first, or if you're watching, you're like, oh no, the video will be out there because I don't like going back and editing my videos because it is a lot of work. Plus, it takes YouTube some time to reapprove the videos and post them. So, but my apologies for that. It was a small little error, but hopefully you have another piece of honey butter that you can use to replace that so you don't have to cut into that second piece. But other than that, that is the cardstock cutting video. I'm going to be going live for project 1. So everything we cut for project 1, I'll be going live tonight, March the 2nd at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time to assemble project number 1. So hopefully you can join me. Other than that, I will see you in the next video.